Hey folks, so recently I've been doing a kind of delay shootout video with all of my behemoth delays. And I've seen kind of on Facebook, on Twitter, on the gear page, on a social media in general, I've seen people talking about the EQ functionality inside the Boss DD-500 and how they don't really understand it. They don't really understand how they could benefit from it. So I kind of wanted to go over that. But I thought I'd sort of also talk about delays. So I'm going to throw this diagram up on screen. And this is kind of a straightforward signal flow that I've put together for a delay. And it kind of represents what goes on in your average delay pedal. There are some pedals that kind of do it in different ways, or they add more stuff, or they take some stuff away, whatever. We're just really talking about kind of straight down the middle, regular delay pedal type approach. So as you could see, there's your input signal, and that gets divided into sort of two paths. And you've got one path, which is your dry, and that's just your dry guitar, and that's going to go straight to the output. And usually this will go through either a mix control, as in my diagram, or you'll even get a sort of direct volume control for that path, like you do on the Boss DD-500. And mix control examples, like the Strymon Timeline has a mix control. The Nemesis, the Source Audio Nemesis delay has a mix control. But yeah, generally you're going to get some level of volume control, gain control over that dry signal. And then you can see on the other path, we've got this kind of this delay box, right? This kind of black box algorithm section, right? And that's kind of in the diagram, that's a placeholder for what your engine selection is, whether it's a tape, an analog delay, just a regular digital delay, whatever style of delay, you could kind of put that in that box in terms of the diagram. And then the output of that delay goes to the mix control and then straight to the output. So at this point, if we were to pluck our guitar, you would hear the dry guitar immediately followed by a single echo of your delayed guitar. Fine, cool, groovy. But we kind of want something a little more involved than that. That's where the feedback loop comes in. So in most delays, you have this feedback loop where the output of the delay feeds back into the front of the delay. And if you just introduce that path and pluck your guitar, then best case scenario, you're going to get kind of just a sustained amount of delay repeats, right? And it could even start building and building and building into a sort of oscillation tone. And so usually what DSP designers do, what delay designers do, is in that feedback path, they'll have a gain stage, or you could even think of it as a volume control, right? But they'll have this gain stage, and when that gain stage is shut off, completely closed, minus infinity in terms of gain, nothing can loop back around because it's just the whole path is silent. So then you're back in the situation where you get just your single echo. But the more you increase that gain stage and start to open it up, the more that you start to get delay echoes that trail away to silence. Because what happens is you pluck your guitar, that goes into the delay, and then the first echo goes straight out. But that first echo also hits the feedback loop and comes back around and goes through that gain stage or volume control that we're talking about, and then it comes back into the front of the delay. So if that gain stage is set to, for example, minus 5 decibels, the next time it loops around, that minus 5 decibels sort of pluck, it comes back around and it hits that gain stage again. And so what you get is a minus 10 decibel pluck. And then it loops back around again and it hits that gain stage again, and then it's minus 15, and so on and so forth. And all the while, you're hearing this kind of process, right? And that's, roughly speaking, that's what you get when you hit your guitar and you set your pedal up just to be kind of an average delay, and you pluck your guitar and the delay echoes away to silence. Great, groovy, standard delay. Why did it take me, I don't know, 5 minutes to explain that? But you get my point. The feedback loop is what creates the nature of delay. And so when you get a delay that, for example, the Source Audio Nemesis delay has a diffuse mode in there, and without going kind of right into the guts of DSP design, in that feedback loop there'll be a diffusion circuit, and so every time the delay loops around, the delay gets more and more kind of smeared and reverb like, because that's what diffusion networks do. So how does this all relate to the DD-500? Well, the EQ can be put into 3 different positions, and as you can see, I've kind of marked those up on my diagram. We've got pre, where you shape the guitar before it goes into the delay circuit. We've got post, where you shape your output of the delay circuit. And then finally, we've got the more interesting one of the 3, in my opinion. We've got feedback loop, which is where you can place an EQ in the feedback loop, and so every echo can have this kind of cumulative effect. So we could boost some low frequencies, and every time it loops around, that low frequency boost is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And you have to be a little careful with some of this stuff, because it's very easy to get a sound that just starts screaming at you and damaging your ears. So yeah, tiny amounts of boosts. Cuts are much more kind of, what would you say, tolerable, right? Because they're not going to increase gain, so they're not going to make the feedback just kind of run off into self oscillation. But I'm going to show you some techniques how to use the EQ pedal in the DD-500, and kind of just go over it and just sort of really try and cover it. If you've got any questions, throw them in the comments below. Thanks for being patient with me. Let's get on to actually making some sounds. I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, so here's my clean tone. And what I have here is just a bog standard digital delay. Okay? So, bearing in mind then my sort of signal flow that I showed you earlier, what we have there is just a basic delay, and there's an attenuation stage in the feedback loop, right? So let's edit this preset, and let's come down to the EQ switch and turn it on to pre. So I'll throw up my signal flow in the corner so that you can see this, but effectively this puts the EQ before the signal hits the front of the delay. It does not affect the dry signal. So to prove that, let's just come down and go to the low cut, and we'll turn it all the way up to 800 Hertz, and you'll see what we get. Now, if you're paying close attention to that sound, you'll hear that all of the low end is gone, but the tone does not change with the echoes. The only thing that's changing there is volume, right? And we can construct a particular tone for the EQ. So let's say 315 hertz I wanted to boost. So we go up to the well, first we set the LM frequency. That just means the low mids frequency, and then we change the gain. And let's set that to something kind of obvious, +8. And because we're chopping 800 hertz, we're probably not going to hear it, so I'm going to turn that down to 200 hertz. You will hear some sort of low mid hump to the tone. So you can hear there that there's this kind of fixed bump in the lows. Let's do a similar thing with the highs. Maybe we want to do 2 kilohertz. Boost the highs quite a bit, and you should hear a similar effect in the highs. And I guess a sort of tip that I could give you is that between 1 and 4 kilohertz, that's typically where your plectrum lies in the frequency range. So if you boost in that range, you're going to bring out the percussiveness of your guitar. If I just bypass the EQ and play a similar thing to that kind of palm muted thing. Now to me, there's a definite flatness to the tone when I do that. So putting an EQ in the pre-stage can be a good way to shape the overall tonality of your delays. And I would say that, again, it doesn't touch your dry tone. So this is a good way to say keep your dry tone quite clear, but to make your delay tone quite, what should I say, dark, I suppose. And the Boss EQ has this high cut parameter. We could cut everything above 800 hertz and we get a very different tone. So you can hear there that you can actually still hear the dry guitar quite clearly, because the frequencies of the dry versus the delay signal, they're not really overlapping because we've cut all of the highs off the delay signal. Now, that's all well and good. Let's exit out, change preset, and then change back so that I've reset it now. Go back into edit, patch, find our EQ switch, turn it on, and now we'll set it to feedback loop. And for me, this is really where it shines. So let's set the low cut to something not totally ridiculous. Let's try 400 hertz, right? And what you're going to hear is that the delay, as it decays away, it's going to have less and less low end. So hopefully you can hear there that we now have this kind of progressive tonality change. Every time we hear an echo, more and more low end is being cut. And why would that be useful? Well, if we're playing something kind of like what I was playing earlier, if we're playing that kind of stuff, we can make room for our dry guitar, and we can start to get these interesting patterns that bounce off one another between the wet side and the dry side. If we actually turn the EQ off and play that, you'll see it starts to get too muddy. It's very hard to discern what I'm actually playing, which sometimes is the thing that you want. So let's get rid of the low cut. Let's come down to the high mid section. Now let's go back to 1 kilohertz. Let's go, we'll stick with 1 kilohertz on the high mids, and we'll boost it by 3. Now we've got this parameter called Q, and basically what Q means is that 1 kilohertz is our central frequency, and the Q controls how much of the frequencies around that central frequency are we actually going to end up affecting. And so if the Q is 16, then pretty much we're going to be affecting just 1 kilohertz. You know, maybe 1.2, maybe, I don't know, 950, maybe between that kind of range. A very narrow range. If we set it to 0.5, we could be affecting as much as 3, maybe 4 kilohertz on the higher side, and maybe even 600 hertz on the low side. So Q is kind of the width of the frequencies that you're going to affect. So if we set that to, say, 4, and we set our feedback to a lower level than we had before, because I just noticed it was starting to feed back, what we're going to get, hopefully if I've set it up right, is we're going to get this kind of resonant frequency that builds up around 1 kilohertz. There you go. You can hear it right in the end of the tail here. That sort of pitched note that's coming through. We can accentuate it by going up to +5 on the gain. And now it's starting to build up. And when you do this kind of stuff, 2 things. Be careful with your ears, because you can easily blow your own face off if you make massive parameter adjustments. A little goes a very long way with this stuff. You could see that the difference between 3 dB and 5 dB in this particular example, it was causing this kind of runaway sort of semi-analog tone to the delay, and that's just a difference of 2 dB. So yeah, be gentle, and also use less feedback than you think you need if you're going to do this kind of thing. We can come down to the high cut. We can cut anything above, say 3.15 kilohertz. And that's gonna allow us to retain the resonant nature of the sound that we set up, but it should be much more controlled in the high frequencies. So you can hear, making that change, I've kind of got a nice delay tone here. I've got a delay tone that will fill in the gaps between my chords, but it won't drown out and it won't swamp what I'm playing. And yes, you can use kind of the pre and the post duck features, but all you're doing there is turning down the delay whenever you play. Personally, I think using an EQ in the feedback loop to control which frequencies are allowed to be prominent and which frequencies are not to be better. So boosting the lows can also be good. Yeah, let's say 4 dB at 500 Hz. We should get a slightly different tone now. Now it's subtle, so you might have to jump back between what I just did and the previous example, but there is a significant tone difference there once you compare them. Let's boost this a little more. Let's do something crazy. Let's do 10 dB. This is going to be a little bit uncontrollable, but I'm going to try it. That's the kind of resonance that you have to watch out for, because I'm boosting 10 dB every time the delay circuit loops back around, and that is a lot. And of course I've just lowered the feedback to compensate for that. But that's a good way to get kind of a dark delay. Boost some lows. Let's bring up the effect level. Okay, last thing. Let's get rid of that low frequency boost and let's come back up to the low cut. Let's set the low cut to 315. That's a good value. Let's come down to, actually let's reset the high mids to 0 so we're not boosting anything, and let's come back to the high cut, bring that down to not quite 630, maybe just 1 kilohertz. Right now, what frequencies between 315 and 1 kilohertz would we want to play with? Well, we can experiment. So if I bring the low mids down to 400 and boost it by 7 dB, but I use the tightest Q factor of 16, and then I come down and we're going to do a similar thing with the high mids, except we're going to go 800 hertz because it's kind of twice as many as the low mids. Similar thing, 7, tightest Q. Let's see what that sounds like. Right, let's bring the effect level down and the feedback up. So in a way, we're able to make the delay circuit kind of sing these particular notes just by using resonant peaks in the feedback loop. Now, certain delays, I don't take this too literally, but certain delays accentuate certain frequencies in their feedback path more than others. You know, a memory man might be completely different to a carbon copy, and that might be completely different to, I don't know, an echoplex, right? But using an EQ in the feedback loop, that enables you to kind of almost model other delays. And if you have a fairly good idea of the frequencies that you should be toying with, you could get close to something like a memory man just using a standard digital delay, right? And I'm not going to go through any other delay types with you because this video is already getting quite long. But if you take this technique and you use it with another delay type like an analog or a tape, you could really start to get unique delay tones. And I suppose the final thing that I should show you, I'm just going to show you quickly, is the other position, the post position. So if you look at the diagram again, post is after the delay circuit and it has nothing to do with the feedback path. So it's very similar to pre. So you can hear there we have a constant kind of resonance. Now, why would you want to use pre over post or vice versa? Well, let's say you have a distortion in the feedback path. And the Boss can do that. It can do kind of a hardware insert type thing, but just theoretically, let's say you had a distortion in the feedback path and you had this kind of wall of distortion that was building up every time you played because you had a really high feedback value. Now, that might sound really cool, but it might be quite fizzy. So post would allow you to, say, come down to the high cut and set it to whatever value gets rid of the fizz for your particular sound. And that's different to the pre position because the pre position EQs the guitar on the way in to the delay. So if you had a distortion in the feedback loop and you set the EQ to be pre, then you're not going to be able to get rid of any kind of fizz or any artifacts from the loop processing. So post is kind of, you could also almost imagine it as like the final polish to the delay tone that you wanted to give it. And it's sort of hard to demonstrate it with just the single pedal kind of in isolation. Really, it's the kind of thing that you notice more in a set of pedals or in a particular combination. If I scoop out all of the lows like I did earlier, it's just going to pretty much sound the same as pre. So, I hope that's useful. I have more delay videos coming with other types of techniques. There are other pedals where you could put EQ pedals into the feedback loop or any effect for that matter. So what I would say is the kind of take-home message of all of this is that if there's a delay pedal that has the features that you want but doesn't necessarily have the sounds that you want, well, you might be able to work around it if it has a feedback loop or a hardware insert function. The different manufacturers call them different things, but they're basically the same thing. So, yeah, I'll see you in the next set of videos. If there are any comments or questions, please post below. Feel free. Flame me for making long-ass videos that are boring to about, 98% of the population. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you later.